Hello, and welcome back to the Real Lawyers podcast produced by Lex Blog Legal Publishing. We're now just approaching 1 million articles on the network, published by over 63,000 lawyers and over 3,000 blog publications. So pretty amazing. But it's an honor to have Dan Harris. Dan was a pioneer in legal blogging and somebody that when I got to Seattle, had been at Seattle for a little while, ran across Dan having the China Law Blog and made it a point to go out and meet him. So now we're sitting here 21 years later, Dan, or 20 years later, talking about blogging as a matter-of-fact thing where it was so new. So how are you doing?
I'm doing great. And I just want to let you know that I have deleted just about every newsletter I get, but I did not delete Lex Blog's weekly international law news because it is really valuable and really good. And it's really good because there are a lot of really good international law blogs still out there.
Yeah, I'll jump a little bit ahead, but one of the things we're going to make a focus on is not just to focus on the fact that we have a good publishing platform that a lot of lawyers are doing, but to focus on more of a legal network. There's so many lawyers that are sharing good insight and commentary that people have somehow think it's not overly credible because it's coming out on the law blog. Needs to be edited in some fashion. But as we started taking a look at what was published on our platform, we were skimming the surface. So we might have a quarter or a third on our platform of publishing, but that means that there's 75%, there's 2/3, or a third out there. So we're going to bring it all in, so lawyers won't even pay to have their content come into the legal publishing network so we can improve the quality of those newsletters and the quality of that content. But it's great to hear that from you because that's something that Colin's going to be working on, is expanding the scope of that network. Somebody doesn't wake up one day and say they're going to start a law blog. How did it all come about for you?
Okay, that is...
There weren't a lot of them around.
That's a funny story. I have a friend, I might as well give him a pitch. His name's Jason Brantley. We're still good friends. He's very high up at Bank of America. In fact, I think he might even be the boss of my son-in-law, but Jason was a young pup back then, and he had worked at my old law firm as like a messenger or something, and he was reading about law blogs, and he said, "You should have one. You should go to this conference." I'm like, I don't have time right now. How about we pay for you to go to the conference? I don't think we paid him. I think we paid for the conference. He said, fine. He came back. He said, you need a law blog. I'm like, okay. So we started out. I can remember the first day it showed that we had 50 readers, and we would check the readers every day. I don't think I've checked our readers for like 5 years, and it's way more than 50. I know that. But when we hit 50, it was a big deal. And then the Wall Street Journal quoted us in their blog or in the Wall Street Journal, and we went from about 55 to about 9.
That's the China Law Blog. What was the idea in focusing on the China Law Blog? Because people didn't understand the concept of covering niches and getting after it and covering a subject. How did that all come about?
Well, it was 2003, I believe, and we were a little bit late to the China game, and we wanted to get known. And there were a few, I didn't know this until we started blogging, but it was just an amazing time because we had the China Law Blog. There was somebody at a top PR firm who had a blog that dealt with China PR. There was a China history blog, a China such and such blog, and all of us became friends. And I might write something saying, this is not how you handle it legally. And it doesn't appear to me that they've done a terribly good job with PR either. And then I'd put Will Moss care to weigh in, and then he'd write a blog post. And then, if I wrote about something to do with how Chinese history in politics or law or something, I'd ask someone else to weigh in. And we were constantly doing that. And it was very much a community. And you talk
very much so.
Right. And blogging is that way. And it always has been.
Yeah, I remember sitting with an organization development person because I wasn't the best leader and still not. And we worked for about 2 or 3 hours on what it is, this vision that I had. And he goes, wait a second. He goes, this is networking through the internet, taking lawyers where they'd never been before. He goes, a little bit Star Trek-y, but he goes, that's what you're talking about. You have a community about what you're talking about. I said, yeah. And it's strange today. I might be talking to a large firm, and they have people working there that went to college to become content marketers. The concept of referencing other people and having conversations about a common subject is totally foreign to them because they're more focused on the length of a post, what words it has in it, what title it has in it, and how do we pay a company to distribute our content. What you're describing is so lost on so many lawyers that it's like being at the busy intersection where the conversation is taking place.
Well, it's interesting because we also have the Cannabis Law Blog, which has done extremely well. And these cannabis publications will say, hey, you really should be advertising with us. This is our reach. It's going to cost you $1,500 a month. And we'll look at it and go, our reach is more than their reach. And we get to tailor whatever we want. I mean, if you run an ad, by the time it runs, you may have decided that you would have been better off advertising something else. But the blog is so immediate.
Yeah.
We've been writing about tariffs left and right over the last 2 months. We didn't do that 2 years ago because it wasn't relevant. It was relevant, but it wasn't immediate.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right, because I would get pitches that I need to advertise here or advertise there. I can remember sitting in my garage on Bainbridge Island thinking, how is anybody going to know about it? I'm going to start a company that does blogs for lawyers. And I'm thinking, well, I can't run an advertisement because it would be selling myself out. I'll just sit here and blog. But by the time advertisers showed up, I had a better audience than they could give me by being found and seen. When you started, I can remember hearing your whole story. I don't know if you remember it, but when we met and you said that you had an edge blogging because you were more blue collar in the way you were brought up and your parents schooled you on something that gave you an edge when it came to a keyboard. Do you remember any of that story? Because I remember it very well.
Well, I don't remember telling you it, but it is absolutely true that my parents made me take typing in high school. Which turned out not to be so bad because I was in there with about 20 females, which is when you're 17 is a good thing. Yes, it definitely is one of my best skills is that I'm an incredibly fast, not accurate, but fast.
But you told me that story the first time we met, and you might have even asked me. And I remember thinking my parents would not let me take typing because they thought that was the shop class. And I'm thinking, well, don't I need to take it because I'm going to get to college and I need to learn use a typewriter? Well, I was always at a disadvantage for the rest of my life, including today. I'm markedly slower than you are with blogging. As the China Law Blog took off, in your firm, tell me about how other lawyers received the whole idea of blogging and what you started to require of other lawyers as to blogging.
Well, what we started to and still require, we have a blogging/marketing requirement. You get a bonus if you hit certain numbers. Let's say if you have 50 points, then you get a bonus. And that 50 points each blog post is a point, each speaking engagement is a point, etc. And because it is important to blog a lot. It's important to blog a lot because the more, it's like anything else. It's like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. The more you do something, the better you get. And most of our lawyers have become good bloggers. Now, there are still the lawyers who will give us something that's pretty good, and I'll say, how long did that take you? Hoping that they're going to say an hour. And they'll go 16 hours. And I'll go, don't do that. I'm always saying it's not a law journal. If you make a mistake, somebody's going to email you and say, this is not accurate. And then you get on there and you change it.
Right.
And it's nobody's expecting a law journal. It's not that.
Yeah. But it's required there. It's not something that okay, one lawyer, two lawyers do it. I mean, you guys are with it. It's something that you require for business development in the firm.
Correct. That's right. It is. But there are exemptions. You don't have to do it if you're on leave or if your hours in a month are going to be over a certain amount, we give you a hiatus because we don't want someone coming back from 12 hours at trial and blogging.
Yeah.
So it's flexible, but yes, it is. And we actually put it in our offer letter. It's that
As you should.
important.
You know, we're going to hire a person right now. And I said, it's not conditional. It's going to be required because I'm not going around the corner again that you'll start to blog after you get here. You're going to agree that you're going to do it up front. You don't hear as many things as I do about people telling me things that I want to be able to tell them. If you knew what you were talking about, you wouldn't say that. But I'll sit with good firms and they will tell me there's no way that you could know for sure that blogging would generate business for a law firm. There's no way that I can track whether this lawyer's blogging is bringing any work to the firm. So that the way we have to track it is through analytics and statistics. And I'm just thinking, why do it then? I mean, how obvious is it to the growth of your firm that blogging has helped you guys tremendously?
Incredibly obvious, meaning we will get calls from big corporations, multinational companies that everybody's heard of in New York, and we're sitting in Seattle. So, I mean, I just assumed they learned about us from the blog. We got a very large company reached out to us after our tariff post because they realized that we could save them money on tariffs. That lawyer is higher up in one of the in-house counsel groups, and that has led, he raves about us, and that has led to an additional steady diet of that work. What's interesting, though, is that it really varies by what you write about. Meaning, I might write something and think, wow, this is going to lead to 50 phone calls, and it doesn't lead to any. Then I might write something but that I don't think will lead to any, and it does. And then there are times, and when we have this blog requirement, I don't think we have ever said no to a blog post. Meaning, we're not saying, oh, you need to focus on what's going to bring us business. We never talk about that. It's fine to write about anything at all because our job is, the job number one is to put out good content that people want to read. And good content isn't, Dan Harris is a great lawyer, you need to hire me. That's bad content. So I don't really think this is going to get me work. I think this is what we're dealing with. This is important. This is what people need answers to. But when you say people don't know, I am sometimes floored at how quickly a blog post in an area that I know zero about gets results. So an example is we have an Oregon lawyer who does a lot of real estate. And everyone has always said, no, real estate, that's a relationship business. There's no point in blogging. So she did a blog post on Friday, and literally 2 clients wrote us over the weekend. And they became 2 potential clients, and they became clients. So, and I actually, honestly, I don't like to even talk about this because I've had lawyers, I remember in the first few years, lawyers would be saying to me, well, no good company's ever going to come to you because of a blog post. And I just remained silent.
Yep.
Because I didn't want them to know that they do.
Yeah, I remember telling Ken Shigley, I'll come down to Atlanta and we'll talk about this. He's going, oh, no, we're not. He was doing, he's a great plaintiff's trial lawyer in Georgia. And the last thing he was going to tell people was just getting on and being himself and sharing insight and commentary on subjects could bring you a lot of great work.
Right.
Yeah,
but the good news is that, and this is true of marketing in general.
Yep.
People always used to reach out to me and say, can you help me do this with marketing and all that? And I know other lawyers. I don't know if you know Madhu Singh. She's very good at marketing. And her and I talked about this one time, which is people think we've got some magic bullet. There's no magic bullet. It takes work. It takes time, and it takes staying power. So it's not going to happen instantly. And I see people try to blog, and they'll blog for 3 months and they don't get results, so they stop. Good for them, whatever.
Yeah, I talked to a lawyer today that said exactly that. It was 3 to 6 months, and she goes, like other lawyers, I didn't get any results, so I stopped. And, and I told her, I said, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And the great thing about it is that there's lawyers that are spending $1 million a year on marketing and advertising, and they'll be paying $1 million a year next year and the year after that. And
Right.
so once you have that reputation, it's hard to get rid of. Now you got to continue to blog, but you got a hell of a name. I mean, I don't know how much traveling you do in a year, but it's probably a pretty fair amount based on the business that you have because of your name and then the continuing insight and commentary that you share.
No, I was I was with my family and we were in Thailand at a elephant farm, and we're sitting around and talking with these people, and they were talking, and I talked about how I had just been to China, and they said, "Why were you in China?" I said, "I do a lot of China work." And they asked me if I had heard of the China Law Blog. That sort of thing happens all the time.
It is an amazing thing. And somebody just handed us a microphone, or a newspaper and said, go do it. I mean, you and I both practice in a day that the idea that somebody would put a computer in front of us and we could broadcast to the world and that we don't know who's coming, but they came. I'd be interested in your take on this, 2003. So I bump into a law blog in November of 2003 after getting thrown out of LexisNexis after my company was acquired by them. It's changed, and people have gotten into this content marketing mode as a way from blogging, which seemed very unique, very personable, and you really got to know people. Have you noticed a change, or do you still feel the same, or do you feel that
There's definitely been a change. So the change that I've noticed is that it's less of a community. And we used to do a blog post that would get 300 comments,
Right.
And people don't comment anymore. And so there's this idea that blogging's dead, long live Twitter.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true either. I do miss the comments. People do email me a lot. And that's something else that's not talked about is that, and this also helps get business. Somebody might call me up and say, this has just happened to us. And I'll go, yeah, no, I know this is happening to a lot of companies. They'll say, how do you know that? And I'll say, because our readers have told me. I mean, we are always on the cutting edge because people will write us and say, hey, you need to write about this or that. And during COVID, it was crazy because people were reaching out to us from China because they felt we were a voice for them and also a reality check. So, I mean, it was kind of stressful. In my family, I got known as COVID Dan because before COVID even hit the United States, I had bought a giant box of masks and gloves. And that literally kept us through COVID. And that giant box cost almost nothing. But I was terrified because people would send me videos of people literally dropping dead on the street in China. And they'd say, they're saying nobody died in Shanghai today. That's not true. I saw 2 bodies myself get wheeled away of people who died from COVID. Somebody wrote me saying, no deaths in Qingdao? I don't think so. We've lost 200 people in my church alone. And so those were some very tough and interesting times. And it was things like that, which when I always say we were one of the first law firms to go remote. We also immediately, by the time everyone else was going remote, we had already been blogging about how to get masks, etc. I can remember the first month of COVID, I was working 16-hour days because everybody was trying to get masks, and we were doing due diligence checks on the 10 Chinese companies a day because everybody was out there scamming. It was just very stressful times. But that month, the first month of COVID shutdowns, was one of the best months in our history, whereas everybody else had nothing.
What drives you? I mean, no, really. I mean, when you hear these stories, when something comes up for action, you're ready to go. I mean, you have high energy, and not just energy, but passion. It feels like an obligation to serve. I mean, because just the passion that you're showing, like, okay, we have to act, we have to respond, we have an obligation to check, if these are reliable sources and things like that. That's not your typical lawyer that might be out on the golf course or something, not to diminish the lawyers on the golf
Right.
course.
Right.
What drives Dan Harris?
Well, I don't like big questions. I don't think of myself as a philosopher or a deep
That's
thinker,
okay.
but it has come up lately. I actually just got back from visiting my brother, who is a star stockbroker. No, he's not a stockbroker. He's a wealth manager, and he's 68 and he's still works incredibly hard. And we've talked about that. It depends on when you say what drives you, what drives me to do what? What drives me in my job is that I love it. And I know that's rare for a lawyer to say. And I feel bad for people who don't love their jobs. And there was a period where I did not love my job at all. And then I quit that law firm. I remember being at the bus stop, not wanting to really go into work. I quit that law firm, joined another law firm, and a few months later, I was irritated that the bus was late. And I said to myself, that's working at a job I don't like is never going to happen again. Now, it doesn't mean I like everything about my job, but there are a lot of things that I like. And one of the things I like is how every day is different and how things change. And how it's difficult to do a good job, but it's fun to do a good job. And that's what drives me. I also am very old-fashioned in that I very much believe in doing the best I can to tell the truth. And maybe it's naive, but I actually think that's a good business strategy as well. And I always tell that to the younger lawyers.
I think it's refreshing. You don't have to stick a finger in somebody's eye in your blog post, but you can be candid, and people appreciate that. I have found. I got away from it for a while, but Lexblog was built by me probably sticking a few fingers in the eyes of large publishers that I didn't think that they were serving lawyers very well. You've been married a long time. You have, how many kids do you have? Do you have one daughter? You have two daughters?
My
Two daughters,
youngest
yeah.
is actually a lawyer now.
What do they all think about this blog thing, and how do they look at it today? How do they look at it in the beginning? I'm always curious because not everybody's dad or husband is a blogger.
I don't think they really care.
Yeah, they probably don't. You have a nice house. They went to college.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think that they're secretly happy when I'm recognized, but they like to make fun of me about it.
I'm sure they do.
But it's, I'm not exactly a celebrity, so.
Yeah, I guess in my world you were. I mean, going back to the story of how, I'm sitting here in Seattle and I go, I got to be associated with the China Law Blog because I'm in Seattle and China Law Blog's here. So somehow Lexblog has got to be tied to it. Do you remember what you made me do before you would even associate with Lexblog in some capacity?
I probably made you take me out to lunch 50 days in a row.
You go, if you don't eat sushi, I'm not even going to be talking to you about this.
I figured I better say that, seeing as how you're from Wisconsin.
So I'm sitting there thinking, well, if it's deep fried, I'll eat it. But it took me a year, and I was out with my team, and it must have been by the advent of an iPhone or something, and I'm sitting there eating sushi, and I think I texted it to you and say, okay, we'll meet.
No, that's not.
It is true. I remember you talking about the blog being kind of a great equalizer, and the way I think you even used the Skadden firm as an example and said we may not get every case as large as they do because we don't have as many lawyers as they do, but we're read in the same way that they are, and we're quoted in the same way that they are. What do you mean by all that? I mean, because that's the way you explained it to me very early.
Well, and again, I mean, that's another thing that a blog does. It puts you on the circuit, whatever that is. And so these groups that say, do you want to speak at this event? Our response is always, we do not pay to speak. We're turning down speaking engagements. And so I might go speak somewhere and there'll be 4 speakers and they're all at big firms that have not necessarily paid to be there, but have used their influence to get the people there. And I will just get asked because the blog is a draw. And we're known. And I get interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, New York Times all the time. And there are other law firms that are out there basically paying to set their lawyers up for that. And so that's what I mean. And in fact, I think that a lot of journalists reach out to us because it's easier. Because all they have to do is they'll read our blog posts and say, well, they obviously know what they're talking about on tariffs. I'm going to reach out to them. And then they do it.
What would you tell, because they're getting a lot of horror stories right now. If you're not going to University of Michigan or Harvard or Yale, they're letting a lot of law grads off the bottom of this hook because of the large corporations are starting to put pressure on the firms that we're not going to pay the rates for the type of things that you might be able to have machines do some of the work for, or at least look at. I'm starting to look at niches or where you want to be and get known for early. Do you still see opportunities for young lawyers, law grads to get known by getting out there and publishing on their own in areas that they might be passionate about?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I have a friend, you may or may not know him, Doug Winslow Nason. His son is, and I tried to refer him a case, or maybe did refer him a case. He decided to focus, and I'm going to get this wrong, so my apologies. He's a very well-known lawyer in Seattle now, insurance coverage lawyer with a top insurance coverage firm, which came later in his career, probably in large part due to his getting known. I cannot remember the name of the firm. It's one of the best insurance coverage firms in town on the plaintiff side. And he became an expert, and I might be selling him short, but I think he's considered one of the top insurance coverage lawyers for building disasters. Because I think that Kansas City or wherever it was in the Midwest, where a bunch of railings and balconies came down.
The walkway went down.
Yeah, the walkway. And so I think that's his niche and his expertise. And that's kind of a hyper niche. But people love hyper niches. I don't think developing a niche is any harder today than it was 15, 20 years ago. There are niches that are being created all the time. You talked about content creators. There are lawyers who represent content creators. I mean, niches are not going away. What's getting tougher for younger lawyers is getting hired and getting trained.
Yeah. Yeah. To that first opening and that first 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. So you can spend evenings with that lawyer learning how to practice law. But I'm telling, maybe I know more about it. Maybe I have skin in the game. I don't know. But based on all the things that I see that are wrong, that some law firms are telling lawyers to do to get known, and then seeing the opportunities that young lawyers have in niches, and some are incredibly passionate. There was a lawyer out of Michigan State, and one of the professors said for every 400 firms that show up for one lawyer at Michigan, we're just the opposite. But to get out there and publish on Bitcoin and then have a managing partner in a leading firm get a hold of you and say, would you like to come and work for us because of that? That's still possible. That's happening now.
Right. And I believe that.
Definitely. And I was just going to ask you if you believe that, because
I believe it.
See it. Other people would say that's not possible.
Oh, it is possible. We brought on a lawyer as a summer intern because he was writing good stuff on international law. And I'm still in touch with this lawyer. Why would I not believe it? I mean, people reach out to people who produce good content. I'll sometimes write a journalist and just say, this is the best piece I've seen on this. You really get it. So then I start reading that journalist more because they understood a difficult legal concept and most journalists were not understanding it. So
obviously, obviously your name is first in the firm in Harris. What year did that firm start?
I am terrible with dates.
About which century, which decade?
I'm terrible with decades. I would say probably around 1998, 2000.
How many lawyers when you opened a shop at the firm?
I believe.
How many lawyers work at the firm today?
About 30, I believe. It's interesting. It's hard to get. I've read about this. It's very hard to go from boutique to get bigger unless you're willing to take big risks.
Yeah. I'm sure you've penciled out at times where you go, okay, it's going to cost this much. This is how much the benefits are. and then we'll go down, we'll get back all of that goes with it. Owning a firm or having that ownership interest in a firm is like owning a small company. It goes up and downs, and then you have to take those risks to get back to where you want to be. It's an interesting phenomenon. I wanted to ask you again on the Cannabis Law Blog, because that was an interesting story. I mean, how many other blogs out there were covering, cannabis?
None.
No. And so,
I mean, basically none. And that's an example of a niche.
yeah,
I'm at the health club on the elliptical trainer, and I'm reading about how cannabis is now a real business. So I call Aaron Pelly, who's a criminal lawyer, criminal cannabis lawyer, but I knew him from blogging
right.
because he would blog. I said, Aaron, is there going to be a need for cannabis business lawyers? And he said, yes. He goes, in fact, if you have a cannabis business lawyer, I'll give you enough work to keep that person busy. So I said, okay, I'm going to buy you lunch.
Yeah.
Except the cheapskate that I am, it wasn't sushi. It was a Chinese restaurant. I brought along Hillary Bricken, and she became the voice of cannabis. And it was incredible because we were out there blogging, and Cannabis Law Blog is still by far, I mean, I don't even know if there's really a competitor. We are the cannabis blog. And I was at a law firm event where somebody was talking about blogging, and somebody asked a question. They said, is it a good idea to have your blog be on your website or something like that? And the person answered by using Cannabis Law Blog as the example. He said, that blog can do it, but generally I think that's a bad idea.
Right.
And he didn't know I was there.
How many years had Hillary been practicing when you sat down for lunch that day and said, Katie, we want to talk about this, about the Cannabis Law
I don't
Blog?
even know if you would say years. I brought her along because she was the newest lawyer at the firm. She was an incredible go-getter, and she had time available. And she had no fear, which I had learned about a week earlier when this client of mine, who's been my client forever, he's in Poland. He called and complained to Hillary about, he was a super tough guy. He'd complained about something. And I jokingly said, well, you call him back and tell him you're not even going to talk to him until he catches up on his bill. And so she called him, and I'm still in like the locker room at the health club. And my client, he's like 6'5", 250 pounds. He calls me up and says, I just sent the money. And he's all sheepish and everything. I'm like, what's going on here? She had chewed him out and terrified him. So I figured she'll get into this difficult area. And it was difficult because, and this is where a small firm has advantages, it wasn't clear that it was ethical to represent cannabis clients. And I took the position, how can it be unethical to help a company comply with laws?
Right.
And so we did it. We created the form that just about everybody else uses, where we're very clear it's illegal federally and all that. And I think, in fact, at one point, I think the FBI even came to our office posing as a client. But what was also interesting, and this is the advantage of getting out in front, there was a activist talk about you have to take a stand. There were people back then who didn't like us because we were very clear. We don't think pot should be sold to children. We think if one of the benefits of legalization is keeping it away from children. And we also were very clear that you need to pay your taxes. Well, some activists reported Hillary to the bar because he was saying that she was harming her clients or something by saying that they needed to pay their taxes, because if they paid their taxes, they'd get arrested. So the most ridiculous complaint ever. And I kept saying, Hillary, they're just going to drop it. They're just going to drop it. And then they didn't drop it. They came out with a 25-page, roughly, decision saying you can represent cannabis clients. And nobody knew about that decision except us. And we didn't tell people. So for like about a year, we had another extra year of runway before the big firms jumped in.
But I used Hillary's story. I used Tracy Riordan's story. There was no cannabis law as far as a niche area of the law until you empowered Hillary and she ran with the ball. I mean, and I would hear stories about what you do. I'd be asking Hillary, and you even had conferences. So you had, in addition to clients paying work, you were putting on conferences that were big revenue
We put on the
opportunities.
first Native American cannabis conference,
Yeah.
and we charged $695 and got about 1,000 people, flew in speakers from all over. It was, bought great lunches for everybody. It was an incredible event because people did not know anything and they needed to learn it. And jumping back to what you were saying earlier, I would tell people, and this is a little bit controversial, obviously, but people would say, because my name was on it, they'd say, I want you to handle this. I'm like, I don't know anything about cannabis. I've never done anything. But I would also start telling people, look, the best cannabis lawyers are young, because if you're a good lawyer and you're 45 years old, you don't have time to take up a new area. I don't have time to become a good cannabis lawyer. You almost have to be young to do that. And I remember it was that way with environmental law. When environmental law first started, there'd be these big meetings with all the Superfund lawyers, and 30-year-old lawyers would be like in this big auditorium, and the 30-year-olds would be doing all the talking, and the best-known lawyers in the area who were 50 would be up at the top. They didn't really know environmental law because they didn't have time to learn it. It was new.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting another aspect of blogging. You learn like crazy when you blog. Man, do you learn, because you're reading, and not only do you have to read and use your eyes, but now it's going through your head. Now it's going through your fingers. You're looking at it on the screen. You are learning, and you are engaging other people through this networking and conversation.
I've had lawyers say, I'll go, this is a great blog post. What made you come up with it? And they'll go, I figured I should know this. And they combine the blog post because it is, I mean, if you just read something, you're sort of looser with it.
Right.
But if you have to actually write about it, then your mind sort of locks in. And at least a dozen times I've had someone tell me, I wrote about it so I could learn about it.
Yeah. And going back to Hillary, and I think it's really important to inspire young lawyers on this. But just like there was no, cannabis law, which now every firm has a blog on that because they're a law firm. But there was no fashion law. All of a sudden, Stacey Riordan comes off the East Coast, moves to the West Coast, and has an interest in fashion law because her parents, her grandfather was around. They didn't call it the garment industry in Carolina. They called it, I don't know what. Textile. That's right. And she told her mom she was going to go to the West Coast and be a, fashion law lawyer. And her mom's going, I don't see how. But to have a law firm like Fox Rothschild said, go for it. The managing partner of a good-sized mid-Atlantic firm that eventually turned 45 blogs loose because they saw all the revenue, allowed her to do it and empowered her to do it, like you said, as a young lawyer, because she had the time to learn it. She put her time, and she travels around the world on this now.
And that's the thing. When you read her blog posts, when she was a lot younger, you're not going, oh, how does she know this? She's 25 or 26. You're just reading and saying, wow, I didn't know this. Age, all the isms can disappear. Nobody really cares.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I could sit here and talk to you all day on this stuff. I mean, really, it's like old home week, but at the same time, it seems so patently obvious that people should be doing, or at least thinking about these things. They can do other type of things. One last question. What's the craziest moment from the blog where you might have said, oh my God, we might get in trouble for this one, or this is too crazy, or what you might have been talking about, among your partners and lawyers at the firm? Is there any else where you go, oh my God?
Well, there were two, actually. One was I couldn't come up with a blog post. So I said to a college student intern, I said, you got to write a blog post today. And she goes, on what? I go, I don't know, read the news. Because back then we were of the view we should write one every day. So she read the news saying that people in China are getting fat and they love McDonald's. And this was based on the news. And then it ended with something like, we used to love ending it with a question, is this a good or a bad thing? And I might have added a sentence to it, or maybe not. Maybe she put it in there about, is this a sign of China's wealth? All these questions. It went crazy viral. Everybody loved it. And so that's why, you don't have to write a blog post on, how to write a contract with a Chinese manufacturer every day. But the other one that I remember is there was a May Day in China. It was May 1. And I wrote a blog post. I'd gotten so used to China used to like me. And so they'd give me a lot of leeway. And so I wrote a blog post that essentially made fun of the fact that China, I forget what they call themselves, a worker's paradise. And I wrote about how their unions are a joke and you don't have to worry about them and all this stuff. And they blocked us for a couple of months. And that was a really stupid thing that I had done, because I could have said the same thing without being quite so blatant and sarcastic about it. So that was not a good book. Good.
How often do you
surprising
travel
thing.
to China now?
Never.
Never.
Absolutely never. Because I think I love China. China has been going downhill since 2013. I started telling companies they needed to leave in 2017. China does not like me. I don't know what would happen to me if I landed in Beijing tomorrow. And I don't want to find out.
Find out. Yeah, that's fascinating.
That's the bit about I have trouble not telling the truth. Actually, it's this business about not telling the truth. I was on TV when Russia seized a couple big companies. I was interviewed and I came back and we had a Russian lawyer at the time and she was furious with me for having said, they asked, how's this going to impact American companies? And I go, well, it's going to cause them to think twice about investing there. And she was furious because she felt that she was going to be costing us business. And I'm like, I actually think if anything, it'll get us business. Because if I had said, oh, no, Russia's great right now, they'd think I'm an idiot.
Right.
Right? I mean, so, yeah.
Yeah. This was great.
I had fun.
This is Dan Harris, Seattle lawyer. Your firm now, what are the two names in your firm? I've known it as different names as Harris and Morey, Howard. I mean, how long did it take Hillary to be a named lawyer in your firm when she was still at the firm? From the time
Not long.
Yeah, not long. Think
not
about
long.
that. Not
right.
long.
Right. She's now in-house with
right.
3 kids. But we're Harris-Slowoski. And back when Hillary was there, we were definitely a lot smaller.
Based here in Seattle, publishers of the China Law Blog, also the Cannabis Law Blog. I don't know if there's other blogs as well now, Dan, or not, or your focus.
Well, we have the HS blog, which is an outlet for anything that doesn't fit in the other two.
But it's very impressive what you guys have done over the years. If anybody's left a legacy in the law, it's been you and your firm, and you continue to do so. So I appreciate all that you've done for the law, because I cared very deeply about it and the people that it serves. So thanks much. This wraps up another Real Lawyers podcast. We'll be back again next week. This is produced by LexBlog, the world's largest legal publishing network. Thank you.